So Art Online Fractured Daydream has released to critical acclaim with swift responses to certain problems from the dev team. Integral Factor had a bad September, particularly because of the Fractured Daydream hype, but recovered to huge heights in early October thanks to birthdays at such a speed that it kinda made me dizzy, and Variant Showdown featured some of their massive changes to the story, including a complete reset of progression. Welcome SAO survivors to Dead Game Report for September 2024, featuring Integral Factor, Variant Showdown, and Fractured Daydream. And this video is brought to you by Royal Revolt Warriors, now available to be wishlisted on Steam. Royal Revolt Warriors is a very colorful survival-style action roguelite. Roam around varied maps, defeat hordes of enemies around you by strategically picking up numerous weapons and upgrades that will aid you in your survival. Upgrade your base stats and abilities at the blacksmith, and make sure to clear out quests to unlock more powerful tools and warriors, all featuring different warrior skills. My favorite is the advisor, who can save up healing items in our backpack to be used later when you actually need them, but explore the other heroes and find what suits your own playstyle. Make sure to click the link and wishlist Royal Revolt Warriors on Steam, and you'll also be supporting the channel along the way. Thank you very much to Royal Revolt Warriors for sponsoring this video. Coming back to SAO, we start with Integral Factor as usual. It's a staple of these videos, and I'll be honest with you, I've been out of the loop with Integral Factor since mid-September. The game was already losing my interest due to the lack of any kind of main story progression for the past 2 years, and I finally stopped my daily streak on my trip to Greece and didn't get back to it afterwards as Fractured Daydream was out. And during my trip to Greece, Integral Factor really fell down in popularity rankings. Now, while me going to Greece instead of doing my 5-minute daily runs with no substance in Integral Factor was clearly a massive blow for the game, I do have this inkling of a feeling that there can be a little bit more to it. So let's have a look into our monthly chart as usual and try to figure out why the game almost broke another all-time low record for itself, staying just above that 50 million yen mark that I deem to be the red zone. Alright, back in August, the game had quite the high point with a good anniversary period, so a drop in September, it was to be expected to some extent. What was unexpected was the size of the drop, especially considering the month started out alright really, relatively on par with August, only slightly below. We start the month with the carryover banner, Elegant Life Order, featuring handsome Yujiro and the others, Alice, Koharu, and Yuna. Sorry girls, but it's Yujiro right there. It carried on average throughout the week, around the rank 400 mark. On the 4th, you can see the effect of Edith's birthday banner going into the 5th. I'm surprised Edith did not have much of an effect though. That was a very mild bump, more so maintaining the average rather than bringing things up. A bit disappointing if you ask me for someone of the popularity of Edith. But combined with the Wild Hunt order featuring Lifa, Sachi, Shinon, and Yui, and some quality of life improvements like release crystal drop rate increases in lower floors, a hunting event, and 6x XP character quest campaign, the week overall was well maintained for sure. But that is kinda where all the good stuff ended and we lost stability for the month. The accompanying banner, the Shadowy Hunter Order with Asuna, Kirito, Agil, and Lisbeth, arrived on the 11th, and the crowd went mild. That's a single day of average uptick and then straight below rank 400. The week did not sustain the performance at all. Only content was an old event rerun too, other than Daily Dungeons Plus 2, so kind of understandable, kind of expected given what was released that week. An autumn selection order on the 14th, it did not help much either. Next reset on the 18th breathed some life back into the game, although it was also very short-lived. Paint Out order featuring Argo, Yujiro, Shinon, and Lisbeth gave us quite the spike alongside a boss rush event and Chaos Showdown campaign, but the hype quickly disappeared and the fashion selection order on the 21st or the Integral Factor livestream could not stop the drop at all as we entered the weekend of the Fractured Daydream open beta there and the game slowly dipped below rank 500. On the 25th, we received a new mini-story of Floor 72 that seems to be focusing on Lifa and Mater, but since I was in Greece, I even forgot to record it up until now. It appears most people were equally apathetic towards the release, as even with the new floor release or Asna's birthday that arrived on the 29th, the game was not able to climb back up at all, remaining below rank 400. If you follow games and developers closely in general, you probably do know. You can hear this from many different developers, but apathy is the scariest thing for a studio, for a developer team. If people are thrilled or happy, that's already great. If they are angry or mad at your game, it's concerning, but that shows you can still bring them back by listening to them. They feel that way because they care after all. But apathy, when they no longer care as they once used to, that is a state that leaves the developers completely powerless to do anything. That harsh reality of development may sound scary, and that's because it is, and Integral Factor is walking a very dangerous line for the past 2 years, barely managing to avoid most players falling into apathy. October has had an incredibly strong start in consistent heights it hasn't seen since the March of 2022, likely with Asuna birthday after effect combining with Shilika and then Kirito birthday banners, but those long-term flat lines in the second half of September, those were very concerning. It's normal to have 1 or 2 day dips here and there. It happens all the time. It's been happening early in the lifetime of the game as well. But long-term flat lines can easily cause your user base to just tune out of your game without even realizing. So again, nothing extremely alarming, but concerning things that should be addressed here. Before we move on, unlike the Japanese market, there was another 11% increase in concurrent player counts for the game on Steam. The peak itself hasn't changed, but the average concurrent player count is once again above 130, around the level of April 2024, which is good news. And the better part is, Integral Factor on PC seems to be completely unaffected by the release of Fractured Daydream, which is a surprise to me. That was one of my fears for the game, which I am happy that it has not happened. Integral Factor is even trending upwards slightly at the moment, so that is definitely a happy welcome surprise for me. And all of that talk about Steam and Fractured Daydream, that is a good segue into the actual Fractured Daydream segment. Technically, all I have on Fractured Daydream from September is the open beta, but I will cheat a bit here and get into the incredible release performance as well. Open beta being free on the September 21 to 23rd weekend has clearly been huge for Fractured Daydream, receiving a lot of mainstream attention as well, not just from SAO fans having a lot of fun. And that was clearly reflected into the release as well, despite being a full price $60 game, which I still think is a bit of a steep price for a game that can only flourish with a large player base due to its multiplayer focused nature. The launch itself, it was great. Art Online Fractured Daydream is currently swinging between 75 to 80%, mostly positive rating on Steam, which is incredible. We often start out with low numbers and recover slowly over time when it comes to SAO games, so immediately finding that range is great. And of course, we only have publicly trackable numbers on Steam. I would love to specifically have the PS5 and Switch numbers, but the launch weekend on PC had over 12,000 at its peak and still over 5,000 at its floor. Naturally, with Monday, the numbers took an expected hit, but the loss was not that large at all, with a regular peak of over 7,000 players playing and still remaining above 3,000 at its worst. Honestly, I was expecting a larger hit from the weekdays, and so far, as I personally predicted, against all those vocal fears and doomsayers, Dragon Ball Sparking Zero's early access launch or its full launch has yet to have a noticeable effect on the numbers of Fractured Daydream. I will continue to observe the numbers, I'm curious myself, but as I said, Sparking Zero was never a direct competitor for Fractured Daydream in my eyes, and aside from the rare fan who may have had to make a choice between the two, overall, there has been no observable significant effect based on publicly available numbers as of now. I'm of course following your reactions closely as well to the game as an unofficial self-proclaimed SAO brand manager at this point who is doing more than the official channels, and I am aware a lot of you are complaining about empty lobbies with 6-7 people tops. Personally, the only time I can replicate those numbers is when I try to play at significantly off hours within my region, so school/work hours in the middle of the day or past midnight. I have otherwise always had healthy 10+ player lobbies, even at higher tier difficulties where less number of players have reached. For reference, I am in Europe, but one recommendation, or rather workaround I can give you right now, is if you're regularly suffering from low numbers of players in lobbies, is to change your matchmaking server based on active times of a given region. So basically, try to switch to a region where it is afternoon at a given time. That means if you're in the US, change to Europe when it is morning for you, or change to Asia when it is around midnight for you. If you're in Europe, change to North America when it is past midnight for you, and change to Asia when it is morning for you. Or alternatively, if your calculated ping on the screen is below 300 ms ping, just switch to Asia in general. Lobbies so far have been consistently populated all the time there. However, use the Asian server as a last measure. For both players in Europe and North America, the Asian server has the highest ping for us in the West and can cause you some unexpected behavior. As long as it's below 300 ms ping, I have experienced it to be perfectly playable. However, your mileage may vary. But continuing on that low number of players in your lobbies, while the player numbers are generally looking fine from the outside, at least on expected playtime hours, issues in off hours seem to be caused largely by players prioritizing the story mode over multiplayer. Of course, a poll I put up on my channel, it is a very small subsample of the entire player base, but when over 85% of people who bought the game, are playing the game, say they are prioritizing the story mode, it does paint a clear picture about the habits that can be generalized to the overall player base here. As more people complete the story and start their journey in multiplayer, you'll also start having better time in lobbies even in off hours. I admittedly do also have some criticisms and feedback on the feeling of repetitiveness, despite the fact that the game actually has a reasonable level of variety for now, for the launch period, but I'll keep most of that to my ultimate review coming soon. If you want some early impressions from me, I have that up on the channel already due to high amount of requests from you wanted to hear my opinions, so I just quickly shared some early opinions on that front. You can watch it by tapping the icon on the top right. On the 17th, we're getting a free update for the hard mode Skull Reaper Tempest boss raid, but I imagine a huge majority of players won't be able to participate in it quickly, as the player rank requirement is an extremely steep rank 90. I'm not even sure if I'll make it there myself, and I'm playing this game as a part-time job right now. But October 17 will also be bringing Strea into the game as the first paid DLC with an additional story and a little bit more content, and that's really the key that will make or break the game, the content pipeline for the live service. So if anything, I am looking forward to the next Dead Game report for Fractured Daydream. With that, moving over to Variant Showdown very briefly, which has been left behind quite a bit. Unlike last month's video update with Takeuchi P, we returned to the text updates on social media talking about the story revamps this time around, and they shared some quite large things actually. The fully voice-acted main campaign updated the UI, dialogue sprite update we all knew, but they have decided to overhaul the story itself, which was something I hoped for slightly, but did not expect them to do. If you remember my earlier reviews for Variant Showdown, one of my main criticisms was that the story had way too many redundant moments where characters were discussing the same things over and over, repeating themselves every other week without much substance to buy time. It seems like with the overhaul, that is exactly what they're aiming to address, stating that while the outline of the story remains the same, they have shortened certain portions for a better story flow. I, of course, can't say anything without experiencing the new version, but theoretically, on paper, this should be a good choice. With the overhaul, the story structure has been changed a bit as well, and thus the entire Chapter 1 story won't be immediately available in the game with the relaunch, but it won't take too long for them to re-arrive in the game. I just hope it does not take too long that returning players will lose interest, but on the other hand, Variant Showdown has always been underperforming due to its technical issues, so most people had already dipped out without experiencing most of the story. Chances are that concern won't be a large problem. Now, the only addition that I want is that if we can have a little bit more solid and tangible world building about Cross Edge, the game, you know, when Variant Showdown returns, that will actually end up addressing most of my problems with the story/narrative of the game. But that is all. Thank you very much for watching Art Online Dead Game Report for September 2024. I will see you all in the next one with October data and news, and until then, stay cool.